the blue water conflagration that's least likely to occur amid conflict in South China Sea with bring all Navy power warships include submarines warfare to the region. Beijing has made believers of important audiences, including the scribes who toil away at the Pentagon producing estimates of Chinese martial might. Indeed, the most recent annual report on Chinese military power states matter-of-factly that the People Liberation Army can now use DF-21Ds to attack ships, including aircraft carriers, more than 900 statute miles from China's shorelines. Scary. But the U.S. Navy has carrier killers of its own. Or, more accurately, it has ship killers of its own. What can disable or sink a flattop can make short work of lesser warships. And anti-ship weaponry is multiplying in numbers, range, and lethality as the Navy reawakens from its post-Cold War holiday from history. Whose carrier killer trumps whose will hinge in large part on where a sea fight takes place. That carrier killer imagery resonates with Western audiences comes as little surprise. It implies that Chinese rocketeers can send the pride of the U.S. Navy to the bottom from a distance, and sink U.S. efforts to succor Asian allies in the process. If the technology pans out, People Liberation Army ballistic missiles could menace U.S. and Allied warships plying the seas anywhere within Asia's second island chain. The upper figure for DF-26 range, moreover, would extend ASBMs' reach substantially beyond the island chain. From an Atlantic perspective, striking a ship east of Guam from coastal China is like smiting a ship cruising east of Greenland from a missile battery in downtown Washington, D.C. Reaching Guam would become a hazardous prospect for task forces steaming westward from Hawaii or the American West Coast, while shipping based at Guam, Japan, or other Western Pacific outposts would live under the constant shadow of missile attack. Now, it's worth noting that the People Liberation Army has never tested the DF-21D over water, 5+ years after initially deploying it. Still less has the DF-26 undergone testing under battle conditions. That's cause to pause and reflect. As the immortal Murphy might counsel, technology not perfected in peacetime tends to disappoint its user in wartime. An anti-ship ballistic missile will be a useful piece of kit if Chinese engineers have made it work. The U.S. military boasts no counterpart to China's family of anti-ship ballistic missile. Nor is it likely to. The United States is bound by treaty not to develop mid-range ballistic missiles comparable to the DF-21D or DF-26. Even if Washington canceled its treaty commitments, it would take years if not decades for weapons engineers to design, test, and field a ship-killing ballistic missile from a cold start. Still, the U.S. Navy isn't without options in naval war. Far from it. How would American mariners would dispatch an enemy flattop in combat? It would depend, that is, on where the encounter took place. A fleet duel involving carriers would take a far different trajectory on the open sea, remote from Fortress China, the People Liberation Army unsinkable aircraft carrier than if it unfolded within range of anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, or aircraft emplaced along seacoasts or offshore islands. In short, the two tactical arenas differ starkly from each other. The latter is messier and more prone to chance, uncertainty, and the fog of war, not to mention the daring do of an enterprising foe. Submarine warfare would constitute a common denominator in U.S. maritime strategy for oceanic and near-shore combat. Nuclear-powered attack submarines such as U.S. Virginia or Los Angeles-class boats can raid surface shipping on the high seas. American submarines, then, are carrier killers regardless of the tactical setting. Now, there's a bit of a futurist feel to talk about battling Chinese carrier groups. At present the People Liberation Army Navy has just one flattop, a refitted Soviet vessel dubbed Liaoning. That vessel is and will probably remain a training carrier, grooming aviators and ship crews for the operational carriers, most likely improved versions of Liaoning, that are reportedly undergoing construction. Let's suppose Chinese shipyards complete the People Liberation Army's second carrier, China's first indigenously built carrier, at the same clip that Newport News Shipbuilding completed USS Forrestal, the nation's first supercarrier and a conventionally propelled vessel with roughly the same dimensions and complexity as Liaoning. It took just over 3 years to build Forrestal, from the time shipbuilders laid her keel until she was placed in commission. Let's further suppose that the People Liberation Army Navy has made great strides in learning how to operate carrier task forces at sea. If so, the Navy will integrate the new flattop seamlessly and speedily into operations, making it a battle-worthy addition to China's ocean-going fleet. Our hypothetical high seas clash thus could take place circa 2020. In 2020, as today, the Carrier Air Wing will remain the surface U.S. Navy's chief carrier killer. U.S. CVNs can carry about 85 tactical aircraft. While estimates of the size of a future Chinese flattop's air wing vary, let's take a high-end estimate of 50 fixed-wing planes and helicopters. That means, conservatively speaking, that the U.S. CVN's complement will be 70% larger than its People Liberation Army Navy opponents. And in all likelihood, the American complement will be superior to the Chinese on a warbird-for-warbird basis. It appears future PLA Navy flattops will, like Liaoning, be outfitted with ski jumps on their bows to vault aircraft into the sky. That limits the weight, and thus the load of fuel and weapons, that a Chinese aircraft can haul while still getting off the flight deck. U.S. CVNs, meanwhile, slingshot heavy-laden fighter, attack jets off their flight decks using steam or electromagnetic catapults. More armaments translates into a heavier-hitting naval air force, more fuel into greater range and time on station. By 2020, moreover, promising anti-ship weaponry may have matured and joined the U.S. arsenal. At present the surface Navy's main anti-ship armament is the elderly Harpoon cruise missile. That pales in comparison with the latest People Liberation Army Navy birds, most notably the YJ-18, which boasts a range of 290 nautical miles. Weaponeers are working at helter-skelter speed to remedy the U.S. Navy's range shortfall. Boeing, the Harpoon's manufacturer, is doubling the bird's range. The Pentagon's Strategic Capabilities Office recently repurposed the SM-6 surface-to-air missile for anti-ship missions, doubling or tripling the surface fleet's striking range against carrier or surface action groups. And on it goes. Last year the Navy tested an anti-ship variant of the Tomahawk cruise missile, reinventing a very, very long-range capability that existed in the late Cold War. A new long-range anti-ship missile is undergoing development.